All right, time for another ride-along Bible study through the book of John. Oh, it's lunchtime. This study could be 10 hours long and not begin to exhaust the scriptures dealing with it. Today, we're going into verse 14 and talking about Jesus is glorious. Jesus is glorious. And we talked about him being rejected. We talked about those that did receive him and were born again. Now we're going to focus in on him and his glory. Look at verse 14. And the Word, that's Jesus, was made flesh. We already covered that God became flesh. He wasn't created flesh. That's out of nothing. Made is from pre-existing material. The eternal God became man. As Paul put it in 1 Timothy 3:16, God was manifest in the flesh. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. Now, before you get in your mind brightness above that of the sun, as was seen of Christ prior to his incarnation, and glimpses like at the Mount of Transfiguration, and after his ascension, as he said in John chapter 17, that the Father would restore the glory that he had with him before the foundation of the world. We're not talking about brightness. We're not talking about Paul falling down because of the glory of Christ and blinding him, although that is there. And then John, the same writer of the Gospel of John, writes Revelation, how he saw a vision of Christ in his ascended glory, and he fell down trembling. We're not talking about the appearance of light here. This is the glory that he manifested by grace and truth. What does it say? And we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of what? Full of grace and truth. Now, you and I, if you're a Christian, and I'm a Christian, we have the indwelling Spirit, yet we have this old body of flesh that's going to the grave. It is not saved. It is not regenerated until the rapture, when we get a glorified body. We have grace here and there throughout the day. We display truth throughout the day a little bit here and there, but Christ was full of grace and truth, like a sponge. The contents of a sponge come out under pressure. Think about Christ under pressure on Mount Calvary, carrying the wood, the cross that he'd be nailed to, his body lacerated to where it hung in little strands, exposing the ribs from the devil-possessed Roman soldiers who had lacerated him. What was left of his face had spit on it, his crown of thorns, that those mocking him. He was under the most pressure anyone had ever felt. And what did he say? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What about the truth under pressure? When the 70... the combined 70 minds of the Sanhedrin and others came together to come up with questions that would stump him. He offered a counter question that blew the fuses in all their little brains. Oh, he's full of truth. What did they say that heard him? No man spake like this man. What did they say that heard him? He spoke with authority, unlike the scribes. See, men like you and me, we quote other men to try to piggyback on their popularity. Jesus quoted no man but himself. He said, I say unto you. He was full of grace and truth. And when you get a hold of that grace that came from him, it's something you've never experienced before. You experience his saving grace, you'll write things like, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. You get a hold of his truth and your mind will be blown. That's why the Bible is the #1 selling book in the history of humanity. That's why it's the #1 hated book and burned and banned. Because that book speaks like no other book speaks. Because it's the words of him who is the creator of the universe, the one who is full of grace and truth. Amen. That's good. See, that could go on for 10 hours, but that's just a short little Bible study as we're traveling along. Thanks for riding along.